Hi, everybody. For this episode, we're joined by Alyssa Clark from California in the United States. Alyssa has taken her life experiences and turned them into her career. Her journey into youth work started by directly supporting young people as a life coach. And today, she's a youth programs manager for Elevate Youth Services, and she now teaches other life coaches about the art and science of supporting young people in school settings. She's kind of more of an introverted person, but she's stepping out of her comfort zone to tell her story as a personal growth experience in self reflection. Alyssa, thanks for being a guest on the Passionate Youth Worker podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. Alyssa, you describe yourself as a helper, someone who likes to give support to others. And you mentioned how important this is to you because you didn't have that type of support when you were growing up. Can you please talk just a little bit about what kind of help would have been good for you and made a difference in your early developmental years?
Yeah, I growing up was more of a shy child, a little bit anxious, and um, I feel like the help that I needed would have been more of that coaching of let's see what she has to say because I never felt heard or understood or even had that feeling of people wanting to be around me, right?
Hmm.
So growing up, having someone that was just interested in what I was feeling, my thoughts, what was going on in my world, would have been really helpful. So today, I love being able to do that with students of hearing their stories, hearing about what they're struggling with, what their life looks like, and just seeing what's the next best step for them, right? So we all have our different paths that we're on and finding out what makes people just their lives a little bit better, right? Having a listening ear is one of the most important things that we can have in our lives. Someone that can just kind of guide us and be there and be a presence. So when you're feeling alone, like I was when I was a child and a young person, even a young adult, having people that made you just not feel like that was really important.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes the best youth workers are the ones who uh, would have benefited from having a youth worker in their life when they were younger. It certainly isn't a prerequisite. And we've had a lot of guests who just right away knew that they wanted to do this, but didn't have that scenario. But being able to relate with young people and put yourself in their situation is really a valuable asset. Alyssa, can you talk a little bit about why maybe you felt like people didn't want you around or you felt so shy or kind of fearful when you were younger?
Yeah, I don't know what initiated that. I grew up just from the youngest age and youngest memories I have. I was just a fearful, anxiety-ridden child. I grew up in a very, very big family, so I'm about number 5 out of 6 kids.
Okay.
So, definitely there's probably some dynamics there with being so young and being one of the, 5 of 6, you're kind of in the shadows at that point. Um, and I had big brothers that were spotlight, did all of the activities, were, the football players and all of that. So, I definitely just kept to myself. And I knew if I did that, I wasn't going to get in trouble or I wasn't going to be, you know, picked on. I was just going to be safe to myself. I never put myself in any risky situations, I guess is what I would think of it as. And because of that, I was constantly fearful of just situations,
Hmm.
natural, everyday situations that I look at now. I'm like, oh, that's just living life, right? So I had that a lot growing up, just from the youngest age. And it took me until adulthood to figure out how to fix it and how to work
Yeah.
through it. Um, and there's a lot of, looking back now, I can see there was a lot of mental illness in our family line. And there was a lot of struggles growing up in our family. Um, and we were a
Hmm.
big family. On the outside, we looked amazing. We were the typical, oh, they're married, they have all 6 children with the same parents. Like we looked like
Hmm.
that picture perfect family. And on the inside, there was a lot of ruptures happening. a lot of hurts and hangups and just things going on in the background that was never portrayed to the outside world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't quite understand that growing up on the fact that I thought we were just that family because that's what everyone told us we were, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, I just assumed that's what it looked like. And now I, as an adult, look back and I'm like, oh, that wasn't healthy. That wasn't how it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
My family did their best with what they were given and the tools that they had. But 6 kids. I have a sister that has Down syndrome, so she needed extra help. And with all of that, it took some tolls on the family, and I definitely felt safer just being in the background.
So you kind of lived with this need to be quiet, need to be kind of out of the way, and you didn't really have anybody to talk to about this. How was that for you? Did it feel lonely? Did it feel scary, or was it just kind of natural how it was supposed to be? Looking back, can you reflect on that?
Yeah, when I look back on it now, I was definitely scared. Um, I knew that that wasn't right. There was a part of me that knew I shouldn't be feeling that way, which made it worse, right? Because you're like, yeah, I
Hmm.
shouldn't feel this way, but I do. And I grew up in a big family, so it's weird to say you feel alone when
Yeah.
there's there's 5 other siblings around.
Right. Right.
Um, but the age range is about 10 years between the oldest and the youngest. So while some are graduating high school, some are just getting started, right? So I definitely had a lot of times where I felt alone or I didn't feel accepted by, that's back in the day where you're playing with kids in the neighborhood. And I just felt out of place a lot. So
Hmm.
I had one brother that I'm close with and still am. And he was that connection for me where we could
Hmm.
talk about what was going on and we could bond. And we still have all of my siblings. We have great relationships to this day, thankfully. But growing up, I don't think they knew where I was at mentally,
Hmm.
because we were all young. Kids don't think
Yeah.
about that. They're not thinking about the other person next to them. They're thinking about themselves. So they didn't know quite the struggles that I had, um, and I don't think my parents recognized it either,
Hmm.
which they had their own struggles that they were dealing with, raising 6 kids, having a daughter with Down syndrome, dealing with their own mental health. So I think it was just I was quiet and easy.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting, and thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, and but I look at you now, and I think here you are teaching other life coaches. So you're a life coach to life coaches, somebody who has to rise above all the things you're just talking about. What things early on kind of helped propel you into being more self confident, maybe less fearful? I know we talked a little bit about your religion and your faith. And can you just talk a little bit about what kind of got you past that? How did you get out of that?
Yes. So one of the amazing things that my parents did was keep us in church, and I created relationships out of that. And my earliest connections and friendships stemmed from being at a youth group in high school. So I learned a lot just by the people that were at church that were there for me. Again, I never revealed a lot of what happened on the inside of our home. They probably had ideas and knew. I didn't think they did, but adults know more than what we lead on to. Um, and they were a safe place for me, so I could go and have relationships with friends,
Hmm.
go to youth camps. We would, raise money to go. They'd help do car washes where we'd raise money to go do this week youth camp with friends. And because of that, a lot of times when you're in those roles, people look at you and they sense like, oh, I would like to see them get further. That's the
Hmm.
goal. Like that's my goal now. I want to help people get further along than they think they can. So I definitely had people that pushed me out of my comfort zones and they challenged me and believed in me more than I did myself. So staying in youth group and being around those people, I honestly think saved my life. It
Wow.
pushed me, it got me out of places that I would want to go. So I look back and It's funny to say, but I thank God for it. I thank God for those
Hmm.
people that were volunteering their time to come and help. They weren't paid employees, they were volunteering just to come
Yeah. Yeah.
help youth that were struggling and wanting to learn and grow in relationships and connections. There's still a lot of those people I know to this day, and they still make those impacts. And a lot of those people are my friends, and people I look up to
Yeah.
this day. Of they were people that affected my life.
That's so great that you're able to find that through your church and those support groups and youth groups, because every young person needs to feel connected to their community in some sort of way bigger than just their immediate family. And when you said it literally saved your life, I'm really glad that you were able to find that. Alyssa, thinking back now, your childhood was kind of scary for you, a little bit fearful. You kind of wanted to be not seen. What did that all teach you about yourself? And what do you bring with those lessons now into your work?
It put me on a growth pattern. So I had to learn a lot to get out of that fear. And it's natural to, fear is a natural state. We need it. Um, but it took me a long time, even into adulthood, to realize how to do that and how to push past those boundaries.
Hmm.
Um, but it taught me a lot of empathy for people, that now I see these young people that are struggling, that have that fear. Most emotions are fear based, right? Most negative emotions are based off of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I can relate to that. And part of me can relate to it in a way that I'm not going to, spill all my guts and tell my story to them to try to fix it. It's more, I'm here to listen, and I'm here for whatever you need. It's okay to be afraid. Someone telling you it's okay to be afraid is a big thing,
Mm.
because growing up, I did not know that. So having someone there and realizing, oh, these are the people that are saving people, right? These are the people that get to go and do the hard work. And you definitely have to have a passion for youth to stay in these kinds of programs, because it's not easy work, and it's struggling because you're seeing people hurt. So for me, I saw what I needed growing up, and I wanted that for other people. And
Wow.
I continue to want that for other people. And that passion has just grown as I've gotten older. So I did youth ministries for a while. Um, my husband and I worked together, and we worked with students, and we still connect with them. They're all now starting to have families, and that's weird for us, but they're all getting older, and we see them and we're like, wow, these were students that um, were either struggling or they were just living their lives, and they allowed us to participate in it. And we still get to see them, and I love the age of social media to where they all live in different areas now, but we can see, oh, look at where they're at now. Look at what they're doing, despite all the things that we all go through growing up. So
Yeah.
we love seeing that, and we have a passion for it. And I took a break after a little while. I had children, did that whole stayed at home with my children for the first 6 years. So I was blessed enough to be able to be a stay-at-home mom for a while. And when I came back in, the opportunity to work with Elevate was there, and it was still getting started. It was, the grounds up kind of movement at that point. And I am so happy that I did something that was uncomfortable, because coming off 6 years of, being with babies and
Yeah.
toddlers and all of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and diving into um, working with youth again and coaching them and hearing their stories and what they want out of life, or seeing them not want anything out of life, and even just getting them to the point to where they want more, was really fun. It it's a lot of work, but it was really encouraging to see that. And now, almost 5 years later, it's just exploded, and now I get
Yeah.
to help new coaches come and do that same thing and multiply that and help more and more students. So I definitely love seeing people move forward despite what's happening around them.
Yeah. And I want to talk more about your coaching other coaches after the break. But I got one more question to ask you before that. But we need to take a short break. So we'll be right back after this. Alyssa, right before the break, I had mentioned I had one more question I want to ask you before we start talking about your work as a coach and coaching other people. And that is this experience that you had as a young person where your parents weren't really tuned into your needs. How are you as a parent in for the needs of your young people? Do you think you are super focused on that and try to do that very differently than your parents, or do you find you kind of repeat the same pattern? Because I'm
That's a
curious
fun
about that because
question.
we tend to repeat things. Yes.
Yes. So it's natural. That's just you were raised a certain way, so you tend to want to go by how you're raised. And there are times where I've been like, oh, no, I'm falling into that rhythm, and you have to check yourself, right? So
Hmm.
my husband and I grew up in very different families, but had a lot of things go on in our lives to where we both know what we needed growing up and what we want our kids to have. So we get to raise them in a way where they're getting things that we never got, which is
Mm,
so fun. And then we always have to think about not spoiling them too much because we
right.
want them to be
Right.
functioning human beings. But I definitely see tendencies that I've fought back from and pushed away of I know, and I don't struggle with the same things that my parents did.
Hmm.
I fought hard to push past a lot of those things. I don't allow certain things in my life to affect that as much. So I'm fortunate enough to not have to carry a lot of the weights that my parents did with what they experienced growing up. And I'm able to not struggle with some of those same
Hmm.
things that they struggled with. So
Yeah.
with that, I'm able to treat my kids differently. And I don't have six kids, so I'm able to focus on my two children and get
Right.
them what they need. But I see tendency in my own children that I used to have growing up. My youngest son has like this fear built into him, like I did, and I see it and I talk to him about it. And because I recognize that as something I struggled with, um, it's funny as a coach, you don't just coach your people that you're with, you coach your children too. So I'm
Hmm.
able to ask him questions. I'm able to see what's making him think that way. It's been fascinating to see it on the other end and be able to help him in those struggles and validate him. And it's okay to be afraid. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So he's been able to push past a lot of those fears. And it's still something he struggles with, but that's something you work on. So
Yeah.
everyone has their own struggles. And then I have my overly confident son that I have to try to rein down because he doesn't struggle with anything. He's got the confidence. So it's been fun to see, yes, pushing back on some of the stuff that we were raised with as parents and raising our children with what we see their needs are going to need to be
Yeah.
met, right? I don't know if that made sense, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to see them grow in ways that I wasn't able to grow. And there's a lot of resources now. There's so many resources that they didn't have 30 years ago,
Yeah.
that we can look into and we can ask for help and we can recognize in our kids
Okay.
what
Yeah.
their needs are.
Well, it's great that you're able to literally turn your life experiences into your work with both your family and with young people. And so you were a life coach, and now you're a coach of coaches. That's probably the way I describe it. I don't, maybe you don't, but what do you teach coaches? What do you instruct them on as the number one thing they need to do when they're working with young people? What's their ultimate goal?
Oh, there's a few, but the one thing that I think we have to remind them a lot of is just be curious. Be curious about your students and what they're going through. So don't be closed-minded to
Hmm.
what their reality is. A lot of times if we don't understand, we just close it off. So it's always be curious about
Yeah.
what's going on in their lives. Um, and we always want to ask more. So don't let it just be that surface, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
favorite question here, the coaching tip is the awe question. And what else? So what else is there? So always remaining curious, asking them what else. And I do that with so many people, even my employees, even my kids. What else? What else is going on? Tell me more. So
Yeah.
I would say be curious is the biggest thing a coach has to do.
That's great. And they'd have to take a sincere interest in young
Mhm.
people, right? And really wonder what's going on with that young person and get to the heart of the matter. What do you think you bring to this field of coaching or youth work that is just something so uniquely Alyssa?
Mhm. Um, I try to remain authentic with what's going on. So uh, I would say I'm always looking for what's real and
Hmm.
not taking away what people might think isn't, right? So what people are struggling with, what's going on in the world, what is the background story. There's always two sides to a story, right? So what is real and being flexible. So because of the way I grew up, I've always been flexible. Um, and because of the way I had to get out of fear so much, I had to learn how to be flexible, right? So it's working with whatever I have. And if that's with one person next to me or if that's on my own, I'm going to work with that. If that's with my children or my husband, it's just being flexible. So I'm here for whatever the world has to offer at this point. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm always looking for that growth of what's the next thing that we can do to be helpful. So I think that was Mr. Rogers, find the helpers, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Hey,
love,
well, there you go. We've come full circle. You're a helper, and it was Mr. Rogers who taught you
yes,
that.
to age myself, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. And I think that those are all valuable things that you bring clearly to youth work and how important all those things are. And you now are coaching other people, but you probably have had some people in your world that has given you advice and solid things to say. Can you think back, like when you were starting out as a life coach and in your very first kind of introduction into youth work? Can you think back of some really sound advice anybody ever gave you that you would like to share that you think have really helped you along?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of working alongside Jack Witt, and he's been a longtime mentor of mine. He knew me when I was young. He's been on this podcast, so he's
Hmm.
an amazing man, and he practices what he preaches reality wise. So um, he's really led the way of, you know, look for the bright spots is something he always talks about. So
Hmm.
what are those bright spots that you can find in people? There's always something that you can find. What is working? And go towards that, right? So if it's not working, there's another way. And I've really utilized that in my life. And I think about that a lot is where's the bright spot? What's going to help this work? So I value that and I've appreciated it. And I think about it whenever times get hard is what's the end here? What's the bright spot? Where's the good? Because there's always going to be good. I can look at the good in every part of my life. And it's because of the people that have actually focused on that. Because the world is crazy. That's just part of it. We live in a world of human beings and we're messy, right? So it's looking for those bright spots and being present with them. So I have the privilege of having a lot of wonderful people in my life that have helped me along that path of finding myself, finding my voice, encouraging me when I didn't think I could do it. So Jack was one of those people that did that. My husband always cheerleaded me on. You know,
Hmm.
I I wouldn't be where I am without him. He always thought I was more capable than I thought of myself. So it's the people that believed in me. So I don't
Hmm.
know if it was necessarily even words. It was just the belief that I could do more. And that made me start actually doing more. So
Yeah. Having those support people and those mentors like Jack or your husband really are something essential that we all need, wouldn't you say?
yeah. Yeah. If you do not have that in your life, go find it.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? We know a lot of young people don't have that in their world. And you think about how hard that must be for them to navigate. And we forget that some of their behaviors might be difficult. They might seem counterproductive, but probably inside them is kind of a scared person, probably like you were when you were younger, and they're just playing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had, like I said earlier, fear. It causes a lot. So a
Yeah.
lot of these young people have a massive amount of fear. They feel alone. So what I felt growing up is not uncommon.
No.
And I look at it now where you have so much at your hands of social media, your phone, you can FaceTime someone immediately. There's always a point of connection, but it's gotten lost in translation because we're more connected than we've ever been in the history of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're so far detached, and they're trying to navigate, and so many young people are doing a great job at this right now. They're reversing it, to where we have so many young people that are like, I don't want that surfacey Instagram post. I want the reality. I want
Oh,
to
that's
be
encouraging.
there are
Yes.
a lot of these young people that are working on wanting relationships that are, physical and tangible, because they've seen people struggle with being the most connected we've ever been, but also the most detached. So there's a lot of hope out there for this generation that is seeking real relationships, real authentic connections, and they want it, and they're not holding back, which I love. I love that these young people are just doing it. They're so brave. They've seen the past generations and they want to push forward, and they're not afraid to do it. Or if they are afraid, they go do it, which is amazing. So
Yeah.
I look at them, and yes, there's fear. Yes, there's loneliness. But they're starting to figure out how to combat that, which is amazing. And there's a lot of support out there. There are a lot of people from the last few generations that see the need and they're filling it, and
Yeah.
they're doing everything that they can to help this next generation come up and be able to live a fully authentic life, right? So I love seeing that. I love that it's not just one organization. You've had so many people on this podcast that I've listened to that are all around the world, all different
Mm-hmm.
organizations, but all have that same hope of let's help these kids, let's help these students just grow and be better people.
Yeah. It is encouraging. And there's just amazing people like you, Alyssa. There's amazing people everywhere doing incredible things and turning their life experiences into something that is so good and so beautiful for this world. Um, you don't have a lot of experience of telling your story and talking about it, especially on a podcast. How did your podcast experience go?
It went good. It's been revealing. Like you said, I'm more introverted, so putting myself out there. I don't usually tell my story, so it's been refreshing, and it's made me think a lot more and reflect on things that have happened in the past, but also be grateful for where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Grateful for the people that are in my life. Grateful for the growth. If anything, I would encourage people to understand that there's possibilities out there, and where we come from doesn't define our future. And I say that even for my parents. They grew. They had a lot of rough things happen, and they're now these amazing people that had to learn how to get past hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And it took them a while, but they did it. And I look at the relationships they have now, and they're healthy and they're bonded. And I look at my siblings, and they've had to deal with the same thing. And I see that in other people outside of my family of we are all just figuring it out as we go, and we're
Yeah.
making the best that we can with it.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to see that no matter where we're at, we can push forward. So wherever low you're at, there's still something else to be done. It's
Yeah.
never too late.
Well, I'm glad your experience was one that's helpful, because this self reflection is so critical in this work, because we are the best tool that we bring into the youth work and support of young people. It's ourselves, it's our experiences, it's our reactions, it's our intent, all those things There's nothing more impactful than one person building a trusting relationship with that other person, like you had with Jack and your husband and other people in your life, I'm sure. So thank you for taking your life experiences and then turning them into a career, which is just giving back and helping young people and helping them take that next generational step. So we just keep getting better and better as a society. I'm so grateful that you were a guest on the podcast. And please say hi to Jack for me. I think of the people that he's touched in his life, and it's just amazing. And it's wonderful that you also had the opportunity to meet him like I have. I feel the same way about him that you do. So thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. You mentioned you listen to the podcast, so you know what's coming next. Before we go, I like to give our guests the last word to close out their episode. What words of wisdom or inspiration would you like to leave with our guest, Alyssa?
Yeah. Failure is a natural. And the only time we truly fail is when we stop and we don't push forward. So don't let fear stop you. Just keep pushing forward.